Start with the basics, because I'm not sure I understand. What is infrastructure? It seems like everybody wants to call everything infrastructure sometimes.
Well, and infrastructure is pretty broad. Infrastructure includes all the basic systems and facilities needed to support our country, our towns, and our state. It's also all those systems and facilities that support our economy. So that it's infrastructure has a big economic impact to our country and how the economy grows, and indeed all economies around the world.
So as I said, everyone seems to agree we need more of it. We got the American Society of Civil Engineers basically saying we need $2 trillion invested. When they say that, where would it be invested? What are they talking about?
Oh, it's really across the board. And if you read that report, it talks about electricity grids, it talks about water is a huge area, our transportation networks. As you know, our airports are woefully behind most of our international airports around the world. It includes broadband. I think we're 16th in the world in terms of broadband connectivity. So it's really, really across the board, and we're woefully underinvested.
So let's talk about how to get that done, because everybody seems to claim at least they want to do it. What's the government's role? Because we have apparently a real conflict between the Democrats and the Republicans, with President Trump reportedly going to say, we'll put up $200 billion against a $1.7 trillion nut. The Democrats saying, no, the feds have to put a lot more money up. What's the right answer?
Well, I think, as an infrastructure investor, we talk about public-private partnerships. So we think that the best solution includes private capital in partnership with the government. You shouldn't let private capital do it all on their own. Government should have a role setting the stage, setting the stakeholder protections, setting the agendas. But the reality is, private capital, there's a huge amount of capital waiting to come into the U.S. infrastructure market. International investors call the infrastructure market in the U.S. the beachfront property of the world in terms of investments, because we've got great rule of law, we've got a great, stable economy, and there's a lot to do. So investment should come from us, but we can't do it without just alone.
Well, why is that? I mean, because you have those factors really making a beachfront property without the government putting any money in at all. Why doesn't private capital come in and say, this is a great investment, let's do it?
Well, part of it is that the regulatory regime and the permitting, I think, needs to come up to the 21st century. And I imagine that we'll hear something about that this evening. So that's a big part. We need to be shown the path within the regulatory environment with the United States. But I will tell you, in our business, we're one of the biggest investors in the United States across our business. We have almost 100 portfolio companies in the United States. We employ about 200,000 people across them. When we talk to state and local leaders, they really want private capital in their infrastructure. They want new water supply. They want new microgrids. They want upgrades to their airports. We're just waiting now for a framework to kind of make that happen more rapidly.
Another question is, do those state and local governments have the money to put in? Because reportedly what the Trump administration is expecting is for state and local to come up with a fair amount of money. You hear from a lot of those leaders, I'm sorry, we don't have the money.
I think that's right. And I think what we're talking about is an enormous amount of investment. So state and local governments have some, but they can't cover the entire amount, which is why private capital needs to be involved.
So where is the so-called low-hanging fruit here? What are the obvious wins that we should be going for first?
A huge one is airports. Airports are an easy thing to invest in. There's a great economic model. There are a lot of airport models around the world which are significantly better and more efficient than ours. And it's something that infrastructure investors like us have a great deal of experience in doing.
Can you make that into a good business by increasing user fees as a practical matter? I mean, could you really jack up some of the fees so that they're more attractive as investments?
Well, I don't think you need to really worry about user fees as much, but you can think about other areas where other countries have done, quite frankly, a much better job than we have, like retail. When you go to an airport, what can you do? You can buy maybe a turkey sandwich. Right. You go to Heathrow Airport, you can buy a Rolex watch. People do that. And so the consumer-oriented revenue in a lot of international airports is much greater than what we have in the United States.
Or Shanghai's like a shopping mall.
Indeed, yeah, indeed.
So do you expect some sort of bipartisan coming together on a structure here that will work from your point of view?
Well, I really don't have that sort of insight. I certainly hope that there will be a bipartisan agreement on what to do, because the country needs it.
So if you were advising the president on his speech tonight, what would you advise him to say?
Well, I think that the president, first of all, it's far beyond me to advise the president of what he should say, but I think that the statements that he has made in the direction he's going about streamlining regulation is a great first step. And I think that what he is doing is looking at other models where infrastructure has really worked well, like the Infrastructure Renewal Program in Australia, where there is a federal incentive system to get states to invest in their own infrastructure. If that can be crafted in the United States, I think we will have a huge wave of very productive investment in this country's infrastructure.
A lot of discussions about permitting and how difficult it is to get things built. How much of that's federal as opposed to state and local? Because the federal government really fix that problem on their own?
Well, I think the federal government can bring leadership. As you know, this is a political process. It's showing state and local governments the way to get things done. And the federal government can play a huge role in doing that. Give us a sense of how much capital is waiting on the sidelines, eager, as you say, to come in. And how much of it is domestic as opposed to international? You mentioned foreign investors. There are trillions, frankly.
Trillions.
I mean, trillions. There are large sovereign wealth funds that are very interested in the United States, a lot of international pension funds, but also, frankly, the first port of call should be our local pension investors within the United States that are looking for a pathway to contribute to their own infrastructure. And this includes public pensions, it includes union pension funds, it also includes private investors. I think the first wave will come from our local investors. We have a big group of very sophisticated infrastructure investors in this country, but there's a lot of capital on the outside waiting to come in.